What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Hustle and Flowchart podcast with your boys, Matt Wolf and Joe Fear.
Let's talk about the networking side. I know you talked about it a million times. You have a whole show around it, but you know, I think a lot of people struggle with when it comes to podcasting, because we train people as well. That's a common question. One of the biggest things is, how do I get connected to that person or this person? Or they see the roster that we've had on. They look at people like yourself. And then a lot of folks just kind of shut down, they're just like, I don't know. But so what would you say to those folks first? And then maybe we can dig into some details on how to scale up.
Yeah, I think when I first got started, the big realization that I had, like when you first start and you've never talked to anybody like that, your initial reaction to thinking about possibly interviewing them is, it's impossible. Mm-hmm. You just write it off immediately. It's just, it's impossible, it's impossible, it's impossible. And the more you tell yourself it's impossible, the more you begin to believe that it's impossible, which then prevents you from doing any work in that direction. So I kind of just had this realization early on that, like, you know what, if somebody has a pulse, it's possible to connect with them.
Yep.
I just have to figure out how to do that. Like there is some way to get a hold of them. There's somebody that they know, that maybe I know someone that knows someone that knows someone that knows that person that they know. That like there's always an angle. Depending on the person or how well known they are or how much their time is in abundance or scarcity, that can be a really, really difficult process or an easier process. It completely depends on the person, but it is possible. And so when you start to frame things from a that's impossible to a it's possible, I just have to figure out how, the question then becomes like, if it were possible, 'cause this is the way I phrase it to people. Like someone will say to me, oh, that's impossible. And I'll say, okay, it's impossible. I get it. But if it were possible, like just like play along with me here. If it were possible, what would it take? Just think, just humor me for a second.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's impossible. I get it. Okay, but if it were possible, what would it take to make it happen? But that's the question that kind of gets your juices flowing and starts making you think like, if I had enough money, I could probably get them booked. Okay, great. So you think pay to play? You think if you pay them, they would come on your show. Okay, cool. Who do you have to get in contact with in order to be able to pay them? Probably like a publicist or an agent or something like that. Okay, great. Why don't you go Google this person, publicist, agency, and see if you can get a hold of somebody at their agency and see if it's even something that they entertain. If it's way too much money, then hey, at least you know how much money you got to get to be able to go book that person. Or now that you have a contact, maybe you can work a different angle with that contact. Maybe they're looking for somebody that that you have a connection to, that you could facilitate an introduction, build up some value and some equity with that person, and then reach back out and get a discount on that booking. Maybe you can have them donate to a charity instead of paying that person directly, and they'll take less money if you donate it to a charity. Like there's so many other things that can happen once you start embracing the fact that it's possible. I just got to figure out how to make it happen.
That's money. I think just the possibility, because even my brain was going, I'm like, I know a lot of this stuff already, but it's like, it just forces your brain to kind of come up with solutions.
I'm curious what your approach is with like the bigger name guests, and basically what I'm asking here is when we have bigger name guests on the show, oftentimes those aren't the shows that get the most traction, that get the most shares. So you can get big name guests, and a lot of times all it takes is pay to play or donate to their charity is something that we've dealt with in the past, things like that. But what we found is those episodes are kind of hard to like sort of ROI, justify the cost into getting that person on, just because they're the ones that aren't going to go and share on Twitter and Facebook that they were just on the Hustle and Flowchart podcast or, the Build Your Network podcast. Like those are the ones that aren't really going to go out and talk about it. So what's the sort of approach or philosophy behind getting the bigger name guests?
Yeah, sure. So number one, you can always pay them to market it as well. Sure. If you want to take that approach. That's something that we actually do. In the back end of Guestio, if you pay a guest to come on, like certain guests will have like almost a menu of options to pick, from like Instagram swipe ups to email list shout outs to different things to like market your interview that they were on with you. But anyway, that's a really obvious direct solution. My question is always around, how much credibility do you want? If you look at the endorsement industry, it's an entire industry that exists based on one psychological principle. And that's the law of association. Because this brand that you've never heard of before understands that, Kevin Hart is in your home 3 nights a week because you're watching his stand-up or a movie that he was on, or your kids are watching Pets. So like and trust Kevin Hart. Let's say even if you don't even like Kevin Hart, you still trust Kevin Hart because you're familiar with him and you know that he's not going to back something unless it's at least some level of credibility and delivers on their core promise of their product or their service. So these companies spend millions and millions and millions of dollars. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, the endorsement industry, every single year on getting people to endorse their product. All they're doing is buying trust with their ideal client, their ideal customer. That's all endorsement is. They're buying trust. So they don't have to take the next decade to build trust with their ideal customer. They can buy trust with somebody who's already earned that trust. Yep. And that's the same exact thing that comes from booking these really high level, credible people onto your podcast, is that if nobody knows, like when you guys first started, nobody knew who you were. Nobody knew who I was. And still to this day, we have like fairly big shows, but we're no Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss or somebody like that. You know what I mean? So when people are introduced to my brand and they have no idea who Travis Chappell is, but they scroll through my Instagram feed and they go, oh, there's Matt Barnes. Oh, there's Mark Manson. Oh, there's Nicole LaPera. Oh, there's, there's an entire group of people that, man, I follow like 12 of these people that he just had, Chris Voss or whoever else, you know what I mean? Like that, they're assigning the trust that they have with all of those individuals to me in some sort of a way. It may not be an equal level, but it'll increase the trust that they have with me in a matter of seconds without me having to spend any time with that person. So to me, that's really the big leverage point and the big ROI is how much credibility and authority do you want in your space? Because the more of those types of names that you can bring onto your show, the more credibility and authority that you have going forward. And what I've found is the highest level of person that you've brought on your show will dictate what level of person decides to share the episode that they were interviewed on.
Yeah, I can see that.
So so if like the highest level person that you've had on is somebody who's just like a well-known podcaster, but isn't known outside of that circle, like the mid-tier podcasters want to associate up with that next level person. So they'll share that with other people, right? But somebody that's at that same level as the highest level, they don't really care about it because they understand that they're bringing the asset to the table in the situation, not the show, right? And that's something that drives me crazy with podcasters. There's probably some people listening that are getting turned off to me right now because of this one thing. But podcasters sometimes get this idea that their show is the shit. Like my show is awesome, you know what I mean? And I'm doing them a favor by bringing them on my show. And it's like, the fact is though, you're not. Like you understand that. I understand you want to think good things about your show and you want to put in good quality work. And I get that, but you still have to have a base level of self-awareness around which party is bringing the asset to the table. Right. And if it's not you, then you have to give that person a reason to want to share the asset that you were on. So now that I can bring on a Matt Barnes and some of these more well-known people that a lot of people know, now I'm finding that the people directly under that tier or level of people, they're way more willing to share the content that we were on. And they're still really well-known people in the business world, but they're not as well-known as some of these other people that I've had on. So my point is in saying that the higher level people that you bring on, the more that people who are not on that level yet are willing to share content, which then helps with sharing of the show. But if you're thinking that I'm going to get this one person on and my show is going to blow up because I got this one person on, I've never had that happen. Right. So it's all incremental, consistent growth over a long period of time. But that credibility and that authority and that brand recognition is really the reason that I think it's a necessary part of the process.